Hello, hello, happy Friday, and welcome back to Beyond the Steps. This is the podcast where we ask one question and dive in with a guest expert on a range of topics affecting performance athletes today, like racism, gender inequity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, and of course, dance medicine and science. My name is Bree Zabrowski, co founder and CEO of Apollo Performance Wear, here with my fabulous friend and co host, Melissa McDaniel Grisham, entrepreneur, social justice advocate, and dance educator. She's the founder of Turning Point Dance Creations. Always happy to be here with you, Melissa. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Today, we're talking about how we can encourage our young performance athletes to establish boundaries and still feel comfortable taking risks. A lot of this is going to be related to the dance space because that's kind of where our community is. But really, we encourage you to apply these to any young performance athletes, especially artistic athletes. And we're excited to welcome back Nicole Perry today of Momentum Stage. So, Melissa, tell our friends out there about Nicole.
Nicole is an intimacy choreographer and coordinator, as well as director and choreographer in South Florida. Career highlights include Broward County Artist Investment Grant for Kinsphere, Intimacy Coordination for Arena, an award winner in several film festivals, choreography and intimacy direction for the U.S. premiere of The Glass Piano at Theater Lab, and resident intimacy coordinator for Measure Theater. She's a certified Lebanon Barton movement analysis, mouthful, movement analyst. Nicole provides guest teaching in Levon for theater and or dance, as well as consent and power dynamics and creative practice through Momentum Stage. Nicole founded this nonprofit to provide affordable resources and best practices for performing artists and teachers. Nicole is an adjunct professor of dance at the University of Miami. She has previously taught both dance and theater in middle school, high school, and studio settings. As a member of the Stage Directors and Choreographers Society and the Association of Theater Movement Educators, Nicole apprenticed with Intimacy Directors International and is in the final stages of certifying as both an intimacy director and an intimacy coordinator with Intimacy Directors and Coordinators, also known as IDC. Welcome, Nicole.
Oh, we had you muted, Nicole. I don't know what happened. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you so much. I realized I should have sent you an updated bio from the last time I was on.
I'm sure you have done a number of different things since then. You're constantly on the move. So we will definitely get an updated bio for your next appearance on the show. But thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me again. I'm really excited to be back.
What do you think it is about setting boundaries? Because today we're talking about boundaries and risk taking and kind of getting that balance between the two. So, what do you think it is about setting boundaries that is so challenging for people, especially young performance athletes, and the challenge for them to implement and understand throughout their lives how to do it with ease?
Yeah. Well, it's hard for adults to do. So it's no wonder it's hard for young people to do. I think the biggest challenge is that they don't even know that they can or that it's
Mhm.
appropriate to, because young people are in school where they're told, sit down, sit still, be quiet, listen to the teacher, do what you're told. And a lot of performance settings are that way as well, whether it's dance or gymnastics or sports, is you have an authority figure and you're expected to do what that person tells you, and that person, because they are an authority figure, are also assumed to be the expert, the
Mhm.
expert in that field, but also the expert in bodies and young bodies and growing bodies. And that just simply isn't possible, right? We are the only ones who are the experts of our bodies and how things feel to us and how we experience them. So it's really being in a place where you can have boundaries because you know that you can and that's appropriate to, and then being in a place that will accept you as a young person having boundaries and hold those with respect.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I have a lot of questions on this, but I know we're going to get to it all today. So I want to jump right in. Let's start with the why. Why is it important for performance athletes, especially young performance athletes, to establish boundaries in their training and competitive space as well?
I think the first one is because we're training them in the field with the idea that they're going on to do this whether it's at college or as a career, that they're going to be continuing with this pursuit. We're not training performance athletes for a one-time thing. Yes, we have that goal as well, but we're thinking sustainably and longevity.
Long term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in order for young people to actually make it to that long term, they have to have boundaries and protective space. Otherwise, they're going to get injured, they're going to burn out, they're going to experience that thing that we see, particularly, I think, in dancers when they transition from like high school to college, or that late high school period when they're like, I'm just done. It's been taking over my life for all these years. And like, now that I get this chance for a break, or I get this chance to make a choice, I'm done. And that's not a great investment choice, right? For like parents and teachers and all of that. But it doesn't really support them in learning how to be in this field as a professional, or even just how to be a healthy adult who can have conversations with other adults about, this is working for me and this isn't working for me.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what you heard there was a collective groan, and everybody that's watching in a collective, because everybody knows that feeling about the kids getting burnt out and fried as they get older. So this is definitely a conversation we all need to be really listening to and understanding. And before we go on, in the context of this conversation, explain very briefly boundaries in terms of this combo that we're having today. What are we referring to when we say boundaries?
Yeah, boundaries is, I'm so glad you asked that, because that's a word that gets thrown around a lot,
Right.
and we don't actually ever define it. So the definition, I have a couple different definitions that I really like. One comes from my friend Nigel Poulton, who's a certified intimacy director in Australia. And Nigel says it's like a fork in the road. Anytime we have to have a conversation about where do we go from here, we could proceed this way, we could proceed that way. How do we want to move forward? That's actually a boundary. And I love that idea of like a boundary being a choice and a way to move forward. The boundaries are not
walls.
Stop. It's, we want to go somewhere.
So how do we get there?
To do that. And Prentice Hemphill, who's a somatic therapist and educator and has a podcast as well, says boundaries are the way that I can love you and me simultaneously. And I love to adapt that a little bit. It's like, boundaries are the place where you and I can work together well and respectfully and with care simultaneously.
So that stigma of boundaries mean you're a difficult person to work with. It's not that. It's that you want to work, you want to do the work, but you want to do so in a way that's protecting your peace, your safety, the health and wellness of your own person and being, as well as the person that you're working with or the people you're working with. Would you agree?
Exactly. And I also think of boundaries as like, if I want to be myself, this is how I can do this thing, right?
Yeah.
If I do it this way, I'm actually not going to be me anymore. Maybe I'll be physically less me because I think I'll get injured. Maybe I'll be emotionally less me because I've been harmed by this. If I want to be the authentic me, this is a place where I have to make a choice, and this is the way that that's going to be true.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, even with me sitting here, is like the connotation with boundaries is difficult, and it doesn't need to be that. So I'm really excited to explore that with you today. What are the risks that performance athletes face if they don't establish those boundaries, if they don't set those parameters? What does that look like?
I think we've touched on that a little bit, just with like longevity and burnout. That is a risk. There's just physical risk that can happen. If we're pushing too hard, too far, too fast, too much, there can be injuries, overstretching, overdoing, stress, repetitive things that happen. Right? But then there's also, I think, an emotional piece to it of when we don't listen to ourselves and our boundaries, that we start to train ourselves to not listen to ourselves and our boundaries, which then begins to affect every other part of our lives where we need to assert ourselves and our boundaries, whether that is in our performance world or in our relationships or anything that we just start to train our body to shut it down and not do that. And I think dancers and a lot of performance athletes already do that in some places where we're like, dance through the pain, the show must go on. And we're already starting to push that threshold down of like, it'll be okay, I can do one more time, I can do one more show, I can dance on a broken foot, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing happens to our emotional health.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. I know you touched a little bit on how boundaries are. You're the only one who can determine what your boundaries are. You're the only one who can determine what it feels like to you and your body. And with that being so individualized, how can we as coaches, dance educators, teachers, and parents help our young athletes identify what their boundaries are? Because I might say, hey, this is a boundary to a young person because that's what I feel is a boundary, but that might not be theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important teaching opportunity, is to help students understand that there is such a big zone of growth and learning, that we have a spot, I call it the confidence zone, where it's like, I'm confident doing this thing. I can go on stage and do this thing right now. Right? Whatever that is, like, that's my confidence zone. And it's always our goal as performance athletes to be in that zone, or as close to that zone as I can possibly get, right? But that's where I want to be. And so that means that sometimes I have to do some learning to be able to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I call that the stretch zone. And if we think of it like performance athletes, as we stretch, whenever we stretch, we're uncomfortable. If you were actually comfortable in it, you wouldn't be stretching, right? That's really the point of a stretch, is to be uncomfortable, because it's actually like ripping those muscle fibers apart so that they grow back differently. And so that the next time that stretch in that spot is our comfort zone and we can go a little bit further. And we continue to do those stretches because, one, we know that they're safe for us. And two, we feel like whatever comes after that is worth the discomfort now. We're willing to be uncomfortable because we know that we're not unsafe, and we're willing to be uncomfortable because we want the payoff. We want what comes after. So I think helping students see, like, where are you really confident? What are the things that you're ready to do? What are the things that you're learning, that you're stretching, that you're growing? And then we have this zone that I call the risk zone. And there are some things that we do that are just inherently risky. Like if you're going to do an aerial or you're going to be lifted, those are inherently risky because of what they are.
Sure.
But we can still get to a point of confidence with them because we've rehearsed them however many times, or we learned how to do it on a mat or with a spotter. So we can still get to that sense of, I'm confident in doing this risky thing because I've had my needs met. I've had time to rehearse. I've had the spotter. I've had the mat. We've done it before, and I feel like this is going to work. And then we have this zone that I call the boundary zone. And this is where it's not going to be a thing. And for some people, those things that some folks feel are a stretch are boundaries. And for some people, the things that are boundaries are stretches. And those risks kind of fall in between. And so seeing it as a really big spectrum from confidence to boundary, with all of this space in between, that as performance athletes, most of the stuff we do is a stretch or a risk. We get that confidence zone at the last moment when we go on stage, right? So most of the stuff we do is in this in-between space. And it's really, to me, the nuanced and meaty part of teaching happens in that space, and happens in helping students differentiate those 4 levels and learning to hold discomfort and know for themselves when discomfort runs into unsafety, and also to learn what it is they need to feel confident and to be able to advocate for themselves and asking for that. Do I need more time? Do I need a mat? Do I need to see you do it first and then I'll be ready to do it? Helping students really understand what it is that they need to feel ready for risks.
Mm-hmm. Can things move from one zone to the other, Nicole? So is it possible for something to move? I mean, the boundary zone seems like a pretty stringent place, but can you then get into an environment where you're like, you know what, that was a boundary for me, but in this environment with these people, with these these things in place, maybe that's not a boundary for me anymore. Maybe it's
I
a
think
risk.
that's a great point. Boundaries shift and change as we grow. And also the context that we're in can really affect our boundaries. I can walk into a space, I mean, like, there's no way I'm letting these people lift me because I've just met them and I don't trust them. But then after we've been in rehearsal for 6 weeks, I may be willing to explore that because our relationship has changed and grown. And I can also go the reverse. If they drop me when I got lifted that I felt like I was ready to do, then maybe I'm not going to want that again. But boundaries can shift and grow, and I think that's also what's helpful of like thinking of these as like zones or a spectrum rather than a wall or a strict like yes no binary. Is that there's all this space that we can play in between, and maybe I'm like right on the edge and then I can slide into or out of. And for me, particularly in that risk zone, it's really about what is it that you need to feel like you can take that risk. Because if that need's not going to be met, it probably is going to be a boundary. And if that need can be met, the goal is to move from risk to confidence and to be ready to go. So I think our goal is to be able to see them all as movable.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. You are just now joining us. We are talking to Nicole Perry about boundaries and how we can help our young student athletes or our young performance athletes or even our young performance artists or anybody actually establish boundaries while still feeling comfortable taking risks. You can catch this episode from the beginning on YouTube at Apollo Performance or at TP Dance Creations. It's also not too late to join us now. We got a lot of show in front of us, so invite your friends to watch and share and drop your comments, and then you can go back and watch the beginning a little bit later. So strategies, let's talk strategies. Strategies for communicating boundaries to coaches and other athletes in a way that's comfortable and effective, because that's the part that gets kind of, okay, how do I say that I don't want to do this? Or how do I say that I'm not comfortable doing this without making people mad at me?
And what do you do when the coach doesn't respect that? Because there are plenty of coaches out there, and there's plenty of even parents that feel like, especially when you're a young athlete of any kind, that it's very much you do as you're told, and you've got your coach and you follow your directives, and the coach's word is it, and that's it, and you do what you're told or you don't do it. So how do you navigate all that?
Yeah. Again, it's one of those things that's hard even for adults. So of course it's hard for young people who are navigating not just saying it to a coach or a teacher, but saying it to someone who's an adult. There's that double power dynamic of like, student teacher and child adult. So it's extra yucky. This is again one of those places where I think having the idea of the zones can be really helpful. Because if you're taking the time to think through, okay, is this a risk that I'm willing to take if needs are met? And do I know what those needs are? And do I feel like I can ask for them in this space and at least have them be listened to with respect, even if they can't be met, right? Sometimes they can't be met. If you need 18 more rehearsals, but the show is tomorrow, that's a need that can't be met, no matter how much you need it, right? But they can still be received with respect. So if I can take the time to think about where is this really for me and what are my needs, then I'm also going to feel a little bit stronger about saying it is a boundary because I've taken the time to think. I know personally that I'm not being reactive and that I know what's going on. Right. So it gives me as the student or a person a little bit more vocabulary and a little bit more confidence in expressing myself. It also gives me the opportunity to say, like, I could do this if, we had more time, we had a mat, whatever that is, right? To say like, this isn't a boundary yet,
Right.
if these needs are met. And then to also see how those needs are met. Are they met with
Right.
respect, even if they can't be held? Or are they met with sarcasm, belittling, shut up and do it anyway? Right? So I think having the zones and the idea of thinking through our risks can be really helpful to myself, and at least feeling confident in asking for them. The other thing to keep in mind when we're expressing our boundaries is that our boundaries really are about us. And that can be hard for the person hearing it to feel, because they are going to think it is about them. Right? If I say, I don't want to do this thing, my teacher is going to interpret that as, this student thinks I'm unsafe, I'm mean, I'm stupid, I'm whatever. Or sometimes it does go the other way, and the teacher's like, the student just doesn't want to do anything, right? But most folks, when they hear someone's boundary expressed, interpret it about them instead of about the person whose boundary it is. But boundaries are always about me. It's about me and my needs and having my needs met. And so I think when I phrase it that way, it's also, one, keeps it about me so I can feel confident in expressing my needs, but helps that interaction so that the person is not, hopefully, going to be reactive and thinks about them, right? If I'm going to do this, this is what I need. I cannot do this because
So
I'm
now,
this or not getting this.
yeah. So now I want to flip it. Now, as a dance educator, if I'm sitting, or any educator, if I'm sitting here and going, okay, I have this vision for this piece. This is what I want. This is what I'm asking for. You don't feel comfortable. Those are your boundaries. Fine. I'm going to get somebody else to do this, you know?
And I think that's a great point. Having boundaries and stating my boundaries doesn't mean that there are not consequences.
Right.
And I need to be okay with that as the dancer, athlete, whatever, that when I state them, that those choices might be made. That if I say I don't want to be lifted, that I'm not going to be in this part of the dance. I do think it is the educator's responsibility to communicate that early, especially if you are going to tell students, you can say yes, you can say no, you can have boundaries around this, but yes and no are only equal options if you've laid them out that way. So if I know that the yes is that I'm going to get lifted, I might say yes, even if I don't really want to, because I don't know what happens after I say no. I don't know if I'm going to be cut from the piece, or if I'm just going to have to do something different, or if I go off stage for 30 seconds and then come back on. So that should be made clear to folks when there is a choice-making opportunity.
Got it.
Not only can I say yes or no, but what happens after each one? Because sometimes we say yes because the devil you know is better than the devil you don't.
Yeah.
But then, so then if I'm that educator, right, and I'm that student, then if I these are my boundaries, okay, we're going to get somebody else to do it. Okay, I'm thinking of a better way to say this. Erase that. Sometimes as an educator, you know your students, you know what they're capable of, and you know when they've got more in the tank, right? So if somebody says, okay, no, these are my boundaries, and you think, okay, I know you can do this. Is it ever okay to try to push and pull that out of them? Or is the boundary clear? They've communicated that, whether you agree with it or not, because I can think of scenarios where I've had students and I'm like, they can do this. They're scared, but they can do this. And I know they can do this. Do you push and uch them along, or do you respect that, and whether you like it or not?
It's why I created this resource, because I think it's so helpful to be able to think about that risk zone. Because as an educator, I should not be asking them to give up their boundaries or negotiate on their boundaries.
Right.
But I can ask clarifying questions especially if I think like, okay, they're just scared.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Then I can be like, what are the needs that I'm thinking of that I could meet or that they might be experiencing that I can ask some questions around, right? Is there a world in which this is available to you if I provide a mat, if I provide a spotter, if we do this really, really slow for the next 2 weeks and we don't even try it in the dance until week 3? Whatever those things are, I think that's where it's helpful for the teachers and the students to be able to think about confidence and stretches and risks and boundaries, because sometimes the student comes to you with needs, but sometimes you have to come back to them and be like, I could meet these needs if this is what's going on.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get more information about what is the boundary, right? Sometimes saying like, I don't want to be lifted, cool.
Yeah.
But it actually is helpful for us to know if you don't want to be lifted today, if you don't want to be lifted because you're super afraid of heights and you're never going to want to be lifted, right? Or if you don't just want to be lifted today because you feel a little nauseous, or you don't want to be lifted because you don't know these people yet, but maybe after a few more rehearsals, things will feel different. So I think asking clarifying questions is totally appropriate, as long as they are asked around how can I meet your needs, rather than how can I get you to change your mind.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Got it. Okay. It's all in how it's phrased. Okay. Because I'm sitting here going, oh man, I've done some bad. But I mean, I have asked those, what are you afraid of? What's wrong? What's going on? And trying to get to the understanding of where this is coming from. That's okay. This is Beyond the Steps podcast, everybody. If you're just tuning in, my name is Bree Zabrowski, here with Melissa McDaniel Grisham and Nicole Perry, and we're talking about how we can encourage our young performance athletes to establish boundaries and still feel comfortable in taking risks. Those are two, it's a muddy area. So we're going to clear that up today. We've already had some really great conversations. And again, if you have not joined us from the beginning, it's not too late. Keep watching. Go back to the beginning of this episode and watch it in its entirety. You can also find this and all of our episodes available on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at Apollo Performance and TP Dance Creations. Make sure you smash that subscribe button and like and share so that we can get this message out to our communities and spread the word. So I want to talk now about how we can encourage performance athletes to learn to trust their own instincts and make decisions that align with their personal boundaries. And again, this is really tough for me because even I know with my own kids, they're 7 and 10, they'll dig their heels in that no. And, you just know that they've got more in them, that if they just try it, it's not going to be so scary. So it's that push and pull. How can they learn to trust and versus pushing themselves a little bit harder?
Yeah. I think differentiating that like stretch, and when I teach this to students, when I teach them these 4 zones, we actually like do a stretch. I tell them, do your favorite stretch when we're introducing this zone. Do your favorite stretch. And then I said, like, are you comfortable? And they're like, no.
It's great. It's brilliant. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right. And just letting them realize that like they're not comfortable all the time. And as performers, we do stuff all the time that is not comfortable.
Yeah.
But we feel safe because it's been taught to us. We've had time to rehearse it. We want what comes after. And so really laying that out and letting them experience it in their bodies. And also just that experience of discomfort and understanding really what discomfort feels like in my body, and knowing that it's different from unsafety. And so I like to take opportunities, even if I'm not explicitly teaching the zones, of even when we're stretching or we're doing something new, of being like, where are you feeling that? What are you feeling? So students are able to tune in to that somatic feedback that they're getting already and realize that it's valuable and that they can hold it and that they understand what it means when they're feeling a stretch, and really start to hold on to that so that when those feelings of unsafety arise, we know them for what they are. And when those feelings of discomfort arise, we know them for what they are and go, yeah, it's uncomfortable because it's new, or it's uncomfortable because it's hard. But that doesn't mean I'm not safe.
Same. Right.
Yeah. Now, same question applies sort of, but for coaches and parents to help their young performance athletes recognize and manage their fears and anxieties related to boundaries and risk taking.
Yeah. I think a lot of coaches and teachers fear that, like, if we say students can say no, they will do nothing.
Right.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
they
I would
ignore
agree with
me.
you. Yes.
Nothing will be done.
100%.
It's like permission for them to just sit.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is not typically
Right.
the case for the folks that we're talking about, right? The folks that have chosen to take this, the folks that are on competition teams and want to win, right? Like, that's not really the case. So I think it's a fear that coaches and teachers have that we need to go, why do I
Right.
have that fear? Because that's not who these students and athletes have proven themselves to be, right? They're here putting in the work. So I also need to trust that they are going to put in the work, and that if they are articulating needs, that they are needs. And I think that's what's helpful about that risk zone idea, and about, like, what are needs that can be met to take this risk, and if they're not met, then it's a boundary. The idea of that risk zone is a dialogue. Hey, coach, this is what I need. Can you do this for me? Yes, cool, let's do it. No, okay, now it's a boundary. The idea of the risk zone is not to, like, sit there forever and be like, I don't know, it's kind of scary. Right? The idea of the risk zone is to be able to move one way or the other. It's Nigel's fork in the road, right? That I'm able to go one way or the other. What's hard for everyone, student, coach, teacher, athlete, all of it, is that we actually have to have a conversation at that point. And none of us are used to having those conversations in calm, clear, compassionate ways. We're used to the adult in the room saying, do this thing, and the child in the room doing the thing, and nobody gets to have any feelings about it. It's just what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, that's how the entire culture is set up. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
And students are experiencing that not only in performance spaces, and like I said before, like in school, sometimes in religious settings, sometimes in home settings, right? They're being told really constantly, children do what adults say.
Yeah.
And so to give them an opportunity to express a need, to have a boundary, the first time a teacher or coach gives them that opportunity, they're not going to believe them. And it has nothing to do with the teacher or coach not being compassionate or not wanting to really support them, and everything to do with the society saying, do the thing the adult said. Right? It's like, it's going to take time. Even I was teaching middle school. The last time I taught middle school was 2021. And it took them the whole fall semester to actually believe me when there were choices, that they could make choices, and that choices weren't going to be wrong. They were just going to be their choices for the moment. It took the whole fall semester to get there, because I was new to them. They were new to me. Every other teacher in their life was not telling them that.
Right.
It took the whole fall semester for them to know that in this space, I can make a choice and have it heard and respected and celebrated at these times. And I also don't, like, give choices all the time. Like, you don't come into ballet class and I'm like, do you want to do ballet today? No, that's not a choice. That's the situation we've agreed to by being in this space together. We have all agreed that ballet is the thing that we're doing. And therefore, there are certain expectations around doing ballet. I'm going to start with the bar. I'm going to go to the center. I'm going to go across the floor. I'm going to wear ballet slippers. I'm going to pull my hair back. Whatever those situations are, we've agreed to them by being in this space. And I also try to make that really clear to students. it's a management theory called the law of the situation by Murray Parker Pollitt. But I would say this is the situation in which we find ourselves. We are in ballet class. So you cannot suddenly change the situation because you're not feeling it today, right? This is the situation in which we find ourselves. And by being here,
I do like
there
that.
are certain expectations that have to be met. The recital is this state. The competition is this state. Those things don't move and change even though we don't like them sometimes. That's the situation that we've agreed to by being here. But that doesn't mean that I can't give you a choice around being lifted in a piece or receiving corrective touch. I can still give you choices around those things, but the situation as a whole is where we are.
It's what we're doing. It's how we got here.
Yeah.
So this is kind of abstract, so it might take me a little bit to get through the idea. But do you think that the idea of boundaries becomes a crutch or a tool sometimes? And I'm gonna liken it to respect. So the last maybe 10 years or so, this word of the teacher disrespected me, she disrespected me, they disrespected me, that was so disrespectful, and that has become a synonym for I got a correction. Or the teacher said, don't be late to my class again, or said, put your hair up, your hair is supposed to be back. Damn, she disrespected me. Like that is, I cannot tell you how many times I have gotten a parent email, a parent thing like, well, you're being disrespectful to my kid, or you have to earn respect. If you want respect, you got to give respect. And so I just wonder if we're getting close to or in this space where it's like, you know what, I don't want to do said thing. I've agreed to be in this situation, like you said, but I don't want to do that part of it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, this is my boundary.
Yeah.
And now we're here.
I feel I totally am in line with you on this. This is where I struggle for sure.
Yeah. I think this is the really hard gray part of all of this for teachers and students, right?
Yeah.
Is saying, okay, are they pushing back against the situation that they've agreed to, right? Like if pulling your hair up is just one of the rules of the studio, of the class, of the whatever, that's the situation you've agreed to by being there. It has nothing to do with me as the teacher. It has nothing to do with you as the student. It is the place where we are. That's the rule. That's the expectation.
Yeah.
This is what's happening.
Yeah.
Right? It's not personal. It's actually quite depersonalized, I guess is the word, because it's coming from the institution or the structure, right? Mm-hmm. And the teacher is setting the structure for the class even before they meet the students. So they're not setting the structure for the class being like, I know this is really going to piss them off if I tell them to put their hair up, right? Like they've set that up ahead of time before they even know who's in the room and what their hair issues are. So they've already taken care of that. So it's really about the structure. And so then like, no, you are choosing to personalize something that is entirely structural. Mm-hmm. And you can choose to do that, but it's making things unpleasant for everyone. Right?
Got it.
So there's that part of it of like, are they pushing back against that? When they're saying like, I'm not going to do this thing, excuse me, let me get some water. I'm not going to do this thing because it's a boundary. As a teacher, I first have to go, okay, am I feeling because I'm taking it personally, in which case I need to take a breath, breathe and pivot and just see like what is going on there. Can I address this as a structural issue that's like not disrespectful at all, but just the situation in which we're in, and they need to learn to see that. That's a life skill that we as teachers provide, is like, when is something an interpersonal relationship issue we can address together, and when is something the world that either we can burn it down and start again, like, okay, let's figure out how to do that, or we can accept that this is the structure that we're a part of for this time frame,
right?
And deal. So I think none of this is easy for teachers, and it takes a lot of reflection, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of commitment to like, yes, I want to teach in this way that allows students to to practice their agency every time they're in my room, even if that means I'm going to get activated when they say no. Even if that means I'm going to have to do more work to think of alternatives for when they don't want corrective touch or they don't want to be lifted or whatever. Even if that means I'm going to have a lot of weird, hard conversations about, actually, it's just because this is ballet class and that's what we have agreed to in ballet class. Doesn't mean we can't have the conversation too around, like, why do we have hair up in ballet class? Like, why is that a thing, right? We can have those conversations, and sometimes that's all folks need. I think most times when folks are saying, this is a boundary for me, what they are saying is, I don't feel safe. And if they're saying, I don't feel safe, as an educator, it really is my responsibility to create a space where people are safe.
Yeah.
So if they're feeling unsafe in my space, is it a need that I can meet? Then I should be finding ways to do that. If it is not a need that I can meet, how do I keep them in my space and engaged so that they're still involved in the situation we all agreed to be here, but that they don't have to do the thing that feels unsafe? Because if someone is feeling unsafe, they're going into fight, flight, or freeze, which is a trauma response, and then they're not learning. Because when we're in a trauma response, we're focused on how to survive. And so there's no energy left to learn. So if they're not learning, I'm not teaching. So what are we doing here?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I know we have to go to homework really soon, but Nicole, what are your thoughts on, we talk about the situation we have found ourselves in, or situation we've agreed to be in. And there are a lot of dance educators, a lot of dancers, a lot of people who feel like the situation as far as dance that we find ourselves in is one where boundaries are not a thing. Like the actual institution, the situation of dance that you have agreed to come into, that you have agreed to be a part of, equals no boundaries.
Yeah.
Like, how do you address that? What are your thoughts on that?
Consent and agency belong to everyone who has a body. And if I ask them to deny that in my space, they're also getting the message that they don't deserve that other places. In the world in 2023, that is not something that I want any young person facing the world with, that they don't have agency, that they don't have choice, that their body doesn't belong to them, and that when things feel unsafe, they shouldn't speak out. I really want them to do that. So I think it is an ethical obligation as an educator to do that, even in dance where it's not very often given, even in athletics where it's not very often given. What's interesting at the University of Miami is that we get a lot of athletes in the dance program because the dance classes fits some of their elective requirements, usually fit in their schedule in the summer when athletes have to stay on campus. So we get a ton of athletes. And just like middle schoolers who have a hard time believing you when you give them a choice, so do the football players. Because they are very used to everyone screaming at them to do this thing and only this thing and faster, harder, better, stronger, all of those things. And to have a choice is new and revolutionary. And it's also a huge responsibility to have a choice and to make a choice and to decide, how do I want to make this choice? Do I want to make this choice to push myself? Do I want to make this choice to take care of myself today? Do I want to do the easy thing because I'm tired? Do I want to do the hard thing because I want to learn? Do I just pick something because I actually don't know how to make a choice? That's what a lot of us do because we're not used to making choices. We just panic pick and go with something. Okay, so I think we're really teaching a lot of skills when we offer choices and when we create opportunities for young people to step into their agency and to practice their agency that ripple far beyond our own classrooms and our own industry. And we see, even still in the industry, horror stories of dancers being abused, gymnasts being abused. You know, the only way this is going to change is actually, I don't think, at the professional level.
Yeah.
It happens with young people because by the time they get to the professional level, they already have the habits and conditioning that we've given them. And most people at the professional level have come through literal decades of training, not just how to do the thing, but how to be in the space where you do the
Yeah.
thing.
Mhm.
And so if we want the industry to change, it has to start
Somewhere.
with
Yeah.
training.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why we do this show. So we are so happy to have this conversation. Speaking of this conversation, if you're just now joining us, we are with Nicole Perry talking about how we can encourage our young performance athletes to set boundaries, but also still take risks. We are nearing the end of our show, but if you'd like to watch it from the beginning, you can find it on YouTube at Apollo Performance or at TP Dance Creations. Also, the links are in our bio, links in the bios on Instagram to get to them, and they're also on Facebook at both of those handles. So please make sure that you go and check this episode out from the beginning. Hit the subscribe button, like, share, and make sure you comment because we want to know what you think. It is time for homework.
Homework every week. We like to give homework in just something small, one thing that our viewers and our listeners can do between now and next week to make improvement in their life in this particular area. So, Nicole, what is that thing that you want to challenge everybody watching to do?
Get clear on what discomfort feels like and what unsafety feels like.
Okay.
What that feels like in your body, what those messages are in your brain. Like, get really, really clear on those sensations and thoughts. And then also for the teachers, think about how you're going to bring that to students, which I think we have a link for them of I've been talking about these zones, right? So I have a resource that I created that has all these zones laid out, and it comes with a video of me going through it again in case you didn't get enough of me talking about it in this. So you can have 10 more minutes in the video that goes with the resource. And there's a discount code to like save 20% on it. So it ends up being, like $4 or something stupid. So please talk to students, talk to yourself about like what is the difference between confidence, stretching, risking, and a boundary.
I feel like there's so many of us that haven't even have those conversations with ourselves to really know the answers to that, and I think that's such a great place to start. Melissa's going to throw that up, that link up for you all on the screen and the discount code for that is TT. That's capital T 423, and that'll give you 20% off if you're interested. We also have homework for you. We're going to challenge you to take our STEPS initiative course. It is a free, all capital letters, free online course series that's going to give you 5 modules to go at your own pace that tackle everything from racism, gender inequity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, and more. Every module was curated by experts in their field. Our own Melissa McDaniel Grisham curated the piece on racism. So we encourage you to check that out. It is not everything you need to know on any topic, but it certainly does give you a foundation. It gives you resources so you can pursue it further on your own if you choose. And we certainly encourage you to do so. Again, it's completely free, and we're going to put that link up for you there. Nicole, how can people get in touch with you? I know in this day and age when everything is so available to us virtually, not everybody has to travel for everything anymore. So I assume you do consults. I assume you work with people on these things like this and train staff and faculty. So how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, momentumstage.org is the website, and we have a contact form there. We have a request a workshop page. It's like right at the top. You can click request a workshop, and we do virtual and in person. We do workshops for students. We can come into a class, and we have like a consent for performers one that's specifically for students, and then we also have ones that are specifically for teachers. We do professional development days and studio learning days and things like that. So you can request a workshop if you want. On our events page right now is a lot of stuff that we have coming this summer. We have a boundaries workshop for performers coming June 10th. which I think is right after this airs, maybe, or right before.
Yep.
I don't remember.
Yep.
And we have a pedagogy course that goes over power, consent, and trauma-informed movement pedagogy. And then we have 4 discussions this summer that are my favorite thing that we do at Momentum. They're called Creating Change Conversations, and we do them every summer. May is race and representation in the arts. June is LGBTQIA artists. July is neurodiversity and disability in the arts. And then August is the educators edition, where a bunch of teachers get together and talk about how all of those topics are showing up in their classroom before we go back to school.
Wow, that's fantastic. I didn't see another thing I didn't know you did. That's wonderful.
Yeah, check out our events page over there.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for all the work you're doing for our community, and thank you for being here today. We always learn little things every week, and this was a big one. Just understanding this topic more is so important, and one I don't think that we talk about enough, or there's not a big enough spotlight on it. So we certainly appreciate you coming and educating all of us on this today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's absolute pleasure. Can't wait to have you back. Thank you, viewers, for watching. I hope you found as much from this, got as much from the show as we did. Can't wait to have Nicole back. Thank you, Bree, for being on this journey with me for now 3 seasons, about to end and be season 4. Oh my gosh, I can't even believe it. And we're turning this into a podcast. So you will be able to catch all 3 seasons at the place where you get your podcast from. So please be on the lookout for that over the summer. Next Friday, we will be joined by Dr. Nasira Cooley to talk about the part that nutrition plays in healing and recovery from injury. So we hope that you can join us for that show. Please share this episode. Like I said before, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. If you're watching us on any platform, make sure you like, share, and comment, because we want to know what you think. Do your homework. Nicole has given you some amazing homework, some super important homework, so make sure you do that. And until we see you next Friday, please continue your journey beyond the steps. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.